We're now here on Daf Vav Amid Beis, and we began studying a brisa that has a very interesting havamina that a person might come to think that the mitzvah of Mora Migdash means that the Migdash itself is considered like a divine entity, a divine power that we should worship. And for that, we need the pasuk, Eshabsosai Tishmoru Ves Mikdashai Tiro, that just like in Shabbos, our Mora of Shabbos, our fear and awe of Shabbos is because of, as we see here on the top of the Vav and Beis, Lomi Shabbos Atom Misyore. It's not that Shabbos is a divine being. Ella Misyore Atom Mimisha Hizir Shabbos, from He, capital H, who commanded us to observe the Shabbos. Af Mora Hamura b'Migdash, so too in the case of awe of the Migdash, Lomi Migdash Atom Misyore, Ella Mipnei Hizir Al HaMigdash. Brisa then says, V'ezo hi Mora Migdash. But what does it mean that we have to be careful about the Mora, meaning God commanded us in Mora Migdash? Lo yikanis adam harabayis b'maklo b'minolo o b'fundaso. One should not enter into the harabayis, and apparently this is an Isa Doraisa. Once you, well, it's not clear. According to the Meiri, for example, harabayis is only Isa Dorabanon. It's only when you enter into the Azara, that's when it becomes Doraisa. But it's the Rambam Shita that seems to indicate that the beginning of Beis of Perek Zayin, Beis Bechira, that even harabayis, the Isser is an Isser de Oraisa. So first of all, he shouldn't hold his stick. Secondly, his feet should not be wearing sandalim, minalim, and he should make sure to wear a belt around his waist. And they used to have these belts that were money belts. They put mos inside these money belts. You should not enter into harabayis with pundasa. And similarly, v'avaksha al raglav. You should not go in to the Azara with dusty shoes. V'lo yasenu kampandria. And he's not allowed to use the harabayis as a kitzur derech. No, he can't go through one opening, one entrance way, and go and exit through a different exit way. Shalol l'shem avoda, el l'shem tzrachav. Urekika, we don't spit on the harabayis mikal v'chomer. It says in Esther, ki ein lavo lamelch el shara melech b'tfush sad. And we're going to derive the following equation. The analogy is sak is eino mos. And ein roy levo ima afilu lifnei melech basa v'dam. So what does this mean? It says in Esther, Prakdalit, ki ein lovel shara melech bilvush sak. Sak is not mos, but nevertheless, apparently it's eino roy lovo ima. Afilu lifnei melech basa v'dam. And rekika is ma'usa. It's how much more so one should not be involved in rekika on the harabayis. That's in front of the presence of the Melech Malchei HaMelech. The ein li ela b'zman shabayis kayim, but b'zman shein bayis b'ayim minola. How do I know that all these isurim will apply in the Makom Migdash even after the Churban? Talmud Lomer Shabtzotzai Tishmoru Umigdashi Tiro Mashmira Hamura B'Shabbos Li Olam Ono mitzuvim olea af liachar churban abayis, af mora amura b'migdash liolam ono mitzuvim olea bein b'binyano ubein liachar churbano. One is enjoined from entering into the Migdash area of the Harabayas even. B'maklo bin olo b'pundaso, that walking stick with its shoes on, or with that money belt, or be avak sha'al raglov, he's got dust on his feet. Lo yasenu kapantri, he's not allowed to use the Harabayas as a shortcut to go through one and come out the other. And Rikika, and the Isa Rikika on the Harabayas is derived from a Kal V'chomer. And the Kal V'chomer is from a malbush of sak. The Torah says in Megillas Esther, ki ein lovo al melech el shara melech b'levush sak. And sak is not something that's repulsive, but yet you're not allowed to enter into before the melech boss of Adam. We're talking about a human king in this context. How much more so Rikika, which is ma'utza, certainly should not be doing such a thing on the Harabayas in front of the Melech Malchi HaMelachim. Even after the destruction of the Migdash. Nevertheless, Minayin, how do we know there's still an Easter in the Makom HaMigdash? Talmud Lomar, Eshav Sosi Tishmoru, Umikdashi Tiro, Mashmira Amur B'Shabbos Liolam. And there's no difference between during the Beis HaMikdash period or afterwards. It's Af Mora Amur B'Migdash Liolam. So we are enjoined from Mora Migdash, whether or not the Migdash is standing or even after its destruction. And now that the Pasuk of Mikdash Tiro is not coming to generate an Easter Beis HaMikdash B'Shabbos, a Bini Beis HaMikdash Shabbos, but rather teach me other things, we no longer have a source from which we could derive that an essay is dochal osa sheish bo kares. And once again, why do we need the miut of alel in the case of yibum be'achos ishto? Ella salkadat coming out with teisei ba'avara. Let's derive the law of yibum that it should be dochal osa sevachos isha from avara of psilas alferes l'streifa hamachuyeves b'streifa. If someone is obligated, is condemned to death by streifa, then we have the burning of the fire to make the psilos and the oferes. And we need the pasuk to exclude that it's not dochik Shabbos. If not for the special pasuk, then other lavim, even though they have cars, would be nidachim mipnei ha'esek. The Tanya to pay Rabbi Shmuel Saviru H Bechomash V'Sefer Shabbos. My Talmud Lomar. What is the pasuk telling to teach me? It's included in the Malachas. Why was it singled out? And the Gemara now sort of interjects a kasha on the Kushas HaBraisa. Why does the Braisa ask such a question? Ma Talmud Lomar. We already had a machlokes tanoim in interpreting lo sivaru, l'shitas Rabbi Yossi l'lav, l'shitas Rabbi Nasan l'chalik. So Rabbi Yossi says that the words lo saviru eish come to downgrade the severity of burning of Havara on Shabbos from a Chiyuv Kares as a regular Malacha down to a Chiyuv Lav without Kares. And according to Rabbi Nosson, it's coming to teach me the halacha of Chiluk Malachos, which means if you violate many different Malachos, Beheli Machas, you only bring one carbon. Sanya, Havara Lav Yotzos, Divrei Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Nosson Omer Lechalek. The Omar Rava explains the Braisa, the Kavanah of the Tana of Rabbi Shol is not to tell us that whatever it says in the pasuk is redundant. We need the pasuk either lalav or lachalek. but rather, Tana de Bei Rabbi Shmuel the Brisa is the language Moshavos, the Kol Moshosechem, Kakashali. That's what he felt was superfluous. And Rav explains Moshavos, when it says B'chol Moshosechem, Matam Alomar, what is this coming to teach us? Is it coming to be marba and Isra Avar b'Shabbos b'chol makom chatem yoshvim bo, even in Chutzoretz? So the Gemara says that this is the Brice's kasha. Michti Shabbos chovas hagufi, chovas haguf noeges bein baris bein b'Chutzoretz. So Moshavos the kasav rachmana b'Shabbos lomali. Why did the Torah feel compelled to write b'chol moshosechem with regard to the Isur of Havara? After all, we're not talking about something that is totally bekarka. It's basically goof, and the Torah goes at it to tell us about Shosechem even in Chutzlaretz. Why we think it's not knowing b'Chutzlaretz? It's a regular law. And the Gemara now goes back to the Brisa. Mishum Rabbi Shmuel Omer Talmud Echad. One Talmud said in the name of Rabbi Shmuel Lefisha. Ever since it says in the 21st chapter of Dvarim, it says V'chiyeh be'ish chet mishvat moves behumas. When we have a mitzvah say of putting someone who's condemned to death, Shomei ani, I might think bein b'chol bein b'Shabbos, that the essay of putting someone who's condemned to death, that means should apply even on Shabbos and should be docha the love of Shabbos. So with regard to the balance of the malachos, whenever you do them, you violate the Isur of Mechaleh Mos Yumas. But with regard to this particular case of putting someone who's condemned to death, that mitzvah of lahamis es hamachuyev b'misa overrides the Shabbos. O eino el afilu misas bezdin. Perhaps the Torah is telling me even that misas bezdin is also Shabbos. Mani mekayim v'humas. When it says regarding haruge bezdin, the humas bechol v'lo b'Shabbos. That's only on chol, but not on Shabbos. Oh, eino ella shafilu b'Shabbos. Or should we say not like that? But the Sfar should tell me that even on Shabbos we should put someone who is condemned to death. When someone is chayav misas bezdin, we're going to kill him on Shabbos. V'lo harnu al chil Shabbos el shelo tzarech misas bezdin. Gemara is going to go through the entire Shaka V'Taya and try to explain. Talmud Lomalo Savaru Eish B'chol Moshosechem. That's why the Torah told me by Avara Lahalan in the parsha of Chiyuv Misas Bezdin for a Rotseach, who Omer, the pasuk says about Midbar Lamed Hey, Ve'hayu Eile Lachem L'chukas Mishpat L'Dorosech B'chol Moshosechem Ma Moshavos HaOmur Lahalan B'Bezdin Af Moshavos HaAmurim Kan B'Bezdin. With regard to later on a Rotseach, the Torah says we put him to death in Bezdin, and Moshavos, which it says here by Avara on Shabbos, is Litzarach Misas Bezdin, Kagon, like for example, Mechuyev Sreifa. So for the purpose of Sreifa, they would burn a fire and they would melt down a Chatich of Oferes, they would pour the Oferes down her throat, and that's Misas Sreifa. And regarding this Havara, Omar Achmona Lo Sevaru, that we're not allowed to do this on Shabbos. And the Gemara now explains how would we prove from this brisa that Esei Dochalosa Sheish Bo Kares, my love, wouldn't it be logical to assume in the intention, the meaning of this brisa, that Lav Rabbi Nosani, the brisa does not reflect the Shita Rabbi Nosan, who told L'chalik Yotzas. and not to exclude skila and kares, and to assume that the Bryce is talking about a lav. Utaima, and the reason why the mitzvah of Sreifa does not override the Shabbos is only because the Kosar Rachmana Lo Sevaro Lav Hochi Dochi, if not for the miyut of Lo Sevaro, the mitzvah of Sreifa would override the Shabbos, that Vahumas, putting the condemned violator to death, which refers to all Chayve Mises Bezdin, is the essay now would be Docha the Lav of Havar B'Shabbos, even though it's a Lav Sheish Bo Kares. And therefore, I would assume that in the case of Achoso, even though it's a Chiyuv Lav Sheish Bo Kares, the essay of Yibum would override it. And that's why we need a Lel to teach me that Achos Isha is not Misyabemis. And the Gemara rejects this answer, lo, not the way you interpreted the Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel, who's holding like Rabbi Nosson, that Havara is a Chiyuv Kares, but rather like Rabbi Yossi, that Havara and Shabbos is only a lav, and therefore we need the pasuk to exclude that Lo Yavir Eish B'Shabbos Tzorch Mises Bezdin. That even though in Kol Kula we would apply the principle of essay Docha Lo Saseh, but the essay of Vahumas is not Docha the Lav of Shabbos, even though there's no Chiyuv Kares. And now we're up to the Tehevi Nam.